Before I say anything about these things, could I just say congratulations to the committee on the 50th anniversary of the event.
You missed it.
As I was holidaying around the north of Italy, I kept an eye on what you were doing, and I wouldn't swap places, but it looked as if you were having fun too, so well done. All sorts of ways of looking about things on rocks, and this isn't going to be exhaustive by any means. Yeah? I mean, I've seen people grow plants on slabs of rock, and trees look terrific on slabs. If you're interested in getting slabs, take a drive up towards Heathcote. There's a vineyard on the way up towards Heathcote called Knight's Granite Hills. And Granite Hills got the huge big granite boulders. And when they get frosts, they often peel off a thin slab of granite. I'm not sure that this is actually granite. I think I picked this up in Tasmania many years ago. But I'm not going to use it, so that can go into the raffle tonight and be put in with whatever is up there. And basically I've drilled some holes in that so a tree can be wired down onto it. Another way I use rocks, and look, I don't say there are as many ways of using rocks in bonsais as there are people who play with bonsais. But this Sargent juniper, it's thick through here, but when you look at it, the actual trunk on this side is somewhat thinner than it is over here, which makes it look pretty odd as a plant. But by sticking a rock in beside and throwing it back over the top of a rock, from a distance when you look at it, it's really hard to tell what's rock, what's roots, what's trunk, and so it gives you that impression of a thick mass of material back through here. Now, you'll use it for your purposes, and I'll use them for mine, but I grow mainly tridents on rocks. And the reason I grow tridents on rocks is they are really well suited to growing on rocks. They grow thick roots quickly. The roots are, they grow and they develop and they will grab onto a rock, but they'll also withstand some of the sun that hits them. And a lot of plant varieties, when you expose the roots over a rock, they get burnt and they go backwards very quickly. I have seen them in Japan taking like a white terry-toweling hand towel in summer, wrapping it over the root mass of a tree, so when you water, you've got this damp cloth sitting over the top of the root. It makes the backyard look a bit strange with these white collections around, but it will keep the roots coolish over summer. I've had really hot days when roots that are exposed fry, and you come up with dead patches all down the back, and it's really disappointing. So I've spent a long time growing roots to grip onto a rock and then find that sunburn has killed off that section of them. So if you are putting them out in the sun, then do what you can to protect the roots and keep them growing. I didn't bring these in particularly to talk about. This is one I bought in Japan and brought back, and it's a nice little tree and it grows profusely, but it's an ongoing battle to keep it in check. They require a lot of work. I can give 4 defoliations a year to something of that size, and they will just keep getting twiggier and twiggier and smaller leaves. This one actually has quite small leaves, and so I've used it to propagate a lot, take cuttings from, and that's a good way of getting exactly the same material. I don't have much of that material around. I took 100 cuttings off that in 1 year by doing it as the 4 lots of defoliation. You can get a lot of cuttings off in the course of a year. But I have brought in tonight a bag, box, seed. I put a whole lot of trident maples in on my nature strip, and the seed that I picked up, Ballarat way. And so I know that the trees I took them from have all got reasonable leaf size and good colour. Whether they'll grow true to that type or not, I don't really know. I could get a couple of buckets of seed from that in a year quite easily. So take as much as you want, and if you ever want more of it, then let me know, because there's more, there is more of it than I ever know what to do with. So you're more than welcome to use it. So I'll get that off there and talk about this. Now, for those of you who've seen this travesty before, let me talk about it once again, because there'll be people here who haven't seen the way that this has been grown. It's a tree I imported from Japan 20, 25 years ago, something like that. And the fumigation that they put plants through when it arrived in Australia didn't do this one very much good. It survived for a couple of years, but not happily, and it just got weaker and weaker and weaker. But there's something to be learnt from the carcass of the original tree. So I'll pass it around and have a look. What I've done is I've gone around with a Texnicolor an outline of a scar. Now, the first thing I'd say is the biggest scar is at the back. Now that's pretty sensible. Put it around the back where you know no one's going to see it, so you hide as much of it as you can. But the scar itself is completely healed. And have a look at the size of that scar. It's, 3/4 of my little finger length through there. So it's been a big cut. I saw a bloke in Japan who gave me let me take some photos of what he was doing. So I'll talk a bit about that while I'm here. But you don't get to make a cut like that unless you're making the tree do a whole lot of growing as well. So he was putting plants onto rocks and then into the garden and let it grow in the garden for 12 months. Now the rule of thumb is if you put a plant and make it grow hard, for every metre of height you get about 1 centimetre of girth through the trunk. So if you want to make a lot of taper quickly, the quicker you can get it into the ground, the more growth it's going to put on, the thicker the trunk's going to get. And of course, if you leave it too long in the ground, you get not much taper at all, because the thing is growing, right up the full length of the trunk. So there's not much point putting things in the ground unless you're prepared to put the work in to dig it up often enough to have a look at it and control the growth and make it do what you want it to do. So I'll pass this around a minute. There's the first wound at the back. Turn it round and you find the second wound is here. It's about half the size of the first one. And then look around the back and there's the 3rd year's growth. Yeah? And then turn it around again and there's the 4th year's growth. And then there's one up the top. So at least 5 years, every year this tree's been dug up, roots chopped back, tree chopped off, and a new leader formed so that you get an increasing amount of taper as you go up the tree. Because if I put this in the ground and just kept feeding it, I don't wind up with a tree that thick all the way up to 2 or 3 metres in height. So you've got to break that cycle if you want to grow a tree with some taper in it. If you're happy with a tree that grows straight up, well, let it go. But it's the taper and the changes of angles that makes trees interesting. And so what I'm going to talk about tonight is planting things on rocks, a bit about achieving taper, quite a bit about thread grafting, and if I get time at the finish, we'll do a complete change of direction. I brought a couple of junipers in that need a bit of, this one needs a bit of grafting. And it's just the time of the year to graft junipers. This, through August, really good time to graft junipers. So if there's time, I'll try and make some repairs in here where a lot of branches aren't where they should be. Anyway, we'll see what time we've got. It's more space I get here, the better. These are seedlings that I put in this time last year. This one is a cutting that I took. It's 12 months old, maybe a bit over 12 months. You'll certainly get thicker trunks if you grow from cuttings. You'll get a proliferation of things if you throw in a handful of seed. And it's really handy to have a whole lot of seed if you want to graft in roots, if you want to graft in tops, if you want to graft in branches. They're handy things to have. So if you'd like to take some at the end, by all means do that. I'm going to put that on a rock tonight. It's a little rock I picked up down on the coast. Stony Point, a lot of these things grow down there. Coronella, the other side of Western Port Bay, you'll find lots of these sort of rocks on the ground. Just wash them well so there's no salt left on them. And because I want this to look a bit like a trunk of a tree in the long term, I've flattened the bottom of it off with an angle grinder on the rock. And I've drilled a hole through the rock so I can tie it down into a pot. Now I have seen people suggest that you glue these into a pot, and on first thoughts I thought, yeah, that's sort of appealing. Glue it into the pot, that'll hold it. It won't fall over when that happens. How you get on when you repot them, I don't really know. If it's already in there, it sort of says to me that you're stuck with that there. So I'm going to put this onto there, and that won't take very long. And I'm going to leave that bit of wire just hanging through the bottom there, so that in a year or two's time when I dig it up, I'll know just where that hole is through there, so it'll be easy enough to tie back into a pot when I need to do that. So, I said it could get messy. It's messy, isn't it? I've put a bit of wire on to get a bit of shape into the top. Now, I want the tree and the rock to look like part of the same piece of material. The rock's going to look a bit like the trunk of the tree. The trunk's going to look a bit like the rock. Now, there's all sorts of roots there. I want to use at least 3 bunches of roots. Now, if you think about this for a moment, it makes a whole lot of sense. If you only use 1 chunk of roots or 2 chunks of roots, you get into trouble. Just do that with your hand, just like that. Imagine there are 3 groups of roots. If this one grows vigorously, it pulls the tree closer into the rock on this side. If this one does, it pulls this direction. So the roots wind up with nowhere to go except to wrap around the rock. If you put them just on one side, the tree can just, The tree can just pull away. It's never going to grip onto it. But put 3, and the bigger those roots grow, the more they're going to pull in onto the rock. And the roots, because they've got nowhere to grow, will tend to flatten out. And the more they flatten out, they grip onto the sides of the rock, and you get the appearance of age and root and rock together very quickly. Right? So, 3 chunks of root. It's probably going to grow that way. So 1 piece of root down the front. Further around there. So now I need to tie that somehow down onto the rock. The person I saw doing this in Japan was simply using aluminium wire. Now I thought I had this all set up, same as doing this, but let me just get some wire. So as tight as I can get it now, back onto the top. There's a good spot. It's not going anywhere. More there wouldn't hurt. Now I'm not worried about these cutting in. If they do cut in, that's almost an advantage. We'll judge for length there. Tighten it up. So we can tie it into the pot at some stage. It's got some roots coming right down to the bottom. It just needs to sit back in that pot and grow on a bit longer. Now at this stage, I'd like to know where the front of that tree is going to be. So what I use, just for, just what I do, the trunk's going to be there in the front of the pot. I just nip out a little bit of a V. So I know that's about where the front is. So when I'm looking at where branches are going to go, I can easily get back to that point and have a look. The bigger the pot I put it into, the more it's going to grow. If I want to put it in the ground, I'll get a whole lot more growth out of it. But as those roots get down into the ground, they become hard work to dig them up. I have tried with some, and I'll talk about them in a minute, of taking these and putting them on the ground. And that's not a bad way of dealing with trees, because you can pretty easily chop the roots off underneath. The roots I want are the ones that are inside, but it'll get plenty of feeding from the stuff that's going down into the ground, which isn't a bad compromise between planting it in the ground and forgetting it, or having something reasonably easy to dig out and to work with. So I'll just put this soil back in here. Gladly put the tarp around. So there's another one to water. Right, I'll get 12 months later, that's what it's done. Something similar to that. Yeah. 12 months, it's grown, that will have grown 2 metres high by the end of this growing season. Plenty of food, feed them, I feed them every 2 weeks. Yeah. At that stage, because all I'm looking for is thickening, I want growth. I'm not looking at fine twiggy development like this, that comes later. At this stage, plenty of rich soil. Yeah, plenty of oxygen, plenty of water. Let the water run right through them, let the food run through them. The more you feed them, the tougher they'll grow. They are tough trees. I've said this here before, and it's true, that they use these things as street trees in Collingwood. Now, if you think about that for a minute, Collingwood street trees, what are you going to do to kill them? they are tough. They just keep growing. But they don't always grow exactly the way you want them to. Take that off. You see in there, there's the rock. Roots growing pretty well around it. But on this side, the root that was in here is gone. It's died. Now, if I don't do something about that pretty quickly, it's going to start pulling it away from the rock in this direction. It needs another root down there for the design and also for the structure of the tree. So I'm going to put a root in there, and look, that is pretty simple to do. Out there. Look like a dentist. Right, there we go. So there's just a hole through there. It's a big enough hole that the buds will fit through. I'll get one out of here. If I'd waited much longer, the leaves that are forming on this would have made it difficult to thread graft into there, because the leaves get in the way. So, a bit more mess. Good. That one hasn't sprouted yet. I don't want to tear the roots off it too much. I want to use them. Right, one new root for one tree. I'm just going to thread that through, thread grafting. So you thread it through the... There we are. Now I want that. What can you see from that, Barry?
Very clearly, mate. I can't see the soil, but I can see the cutting.
Yeah, so...
You'll just tip it over just to show them just for a second.
Yeah. Let's get rid of that root there.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So that'll come down there somewhere.
Yep. Got
So
it.
I was there 1, 2, come on this side. That will grow there amazingly quickly. So I'll just put
that was you wired that onto the rock last year.
this one.
Yeah. So we need to take the wire off.
There's wires still in there.
Still in there. Okay.
They're still in there. It's got more roots over the top. I can show you easily on one of these. Yeah. So I want to get this now back close to that rock again. So a bit more wire. And of course this is just going to trap more of the current, the roots that have grown in the last 12 months. It's just going to...
Will that wire cut into the root?
Yep. Good.
It will?
Oh, that's what you want.
Okay.
Well, it won't do any harm
Why is it good?
because it'll make the roots grow. They don't like it. They will grow to surround it. They will put on growth in that area to become bigger and stronger. Not what I'd be recommending if it's up here where you're going to see it, but we want thick, heavy roots, or I want heavy roots. So, where are we, Barry?
Yeah, got it, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's now tight back onto the rock. Yep. So we cut off the excess wire. And I want to cover that up. Now I put this in here, not a bad thing if you want to cover up roots, just get an old pot, put a slit in it, so that can go and make a collar. Yeah. Bit of wire there will help. Pin it back together.
When you build the hole and got the graft come through, do you seal around it? Because
Good
the
idea
hole's
too,
a small
yep.
one?
I haven't quite, I can still get into there, yeah. What I'll do is I'll wedge it across to one side of that hole, so it's got force pulling it back there. Yep.
And that's to reduce the light, the collar? The collar
No,
is
so I can put soil up around it to cover it,
Okay.
so it's getting, it won't dry out, it'll be just getting watered the same as everything else. Now, somewhere here, so everything comes to those who remember. So look, just a piece of old chopstick. Split it down the middle. And they can go
Can you show us what it looks like?
this way.
Did you just put a split in the chopsticks?
Yeah.
That's just a chopstick.
Yeah.
It's like a pig.
So I'm just jamming that in there.
In the hole.
Yep.
Are you going to remove that in time?
Look, in time, it'll rot out, it won't cause... So if you look in there, Barry, it's just jamming this across to one side so that there's a point of contact. It won't wobble around. It'll happily grow in there, and I could do it in this side as well, but it's not going to matter. It really isn't going to matter. All right. So that's made some running repairs to that one.
And is that branch going to stay there, or are you going to cut that off later? You just wanted the roots, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll deal with that later.
Depends on how it looks.
These are some I did last year. When we get up to that, we've got some other things to do first.
Okay.
But we'll look at what we do with those once they've taken. All
How
right?
long does it take to heal over?
That's been... I did those 12 months ago. Yeah. All right. Now I've got great hopes for this one. It's on a nice piece of rock, and the roots come from where you are, they come up out of the soil, and then at about 90 degrees angle come back towards me. And then, with a bit of careful wiring, they go 90 degrees back in this direction to come to this. And then it comes up again. And then it goes across again. Yeah? So it's not just a straight stick sticking out of the pot. It's got lots of movement built into it. But up here, it starts to go wrong. Well, that's all going to come off. That will be chopped off here somewhere, all in good time. When it's got a new trunk going in the direction that I want to. Now, I've had a look, and I reckon that with this coming, it would be really good if the trunk came maybe this way. Yeah? You pick an angle, it can go any way, it can go any... But so I'm going to put a hole through there and put this piece back up through there. Now, why would I make it out of this piece? Well, the reason I do that is, genetically it's all the same. So whatever the leaves and buds are doing on this, it's the same as all of these. And so if I eventually use a bud that comes up out of here for something else, for another branch somewhere or whatever, it will be genetically matching. It'll have the same colour, it'll have the same size, it'll be the same material. Yeah? So, having got this part of it, yeah, just turn it around, set it into the shape I want. I can now start looking at the next bit up the top, putting that into the direction I want. Alright. Very nice. So, the drill could get a bit of work out tonight. Maybe there.
What's the size of that drill?
Look, it's just big enough that when you
Just
Just the right size.
it's got to be big enough that the buds can go through without stripping the buds off as you poke it through the hole that you've made. If you don't make it big enough, you'll be knocking those buds off as you poke it through the hole. And if you make it too big, it'll just take a bit longer to fill it up for this tree to grow into that hole. But remember what I said, 1 centimetre of thickness for 2 metres of growth. So I'm not going to go anywhere near 1 centimetre hole through this. So within 12 months, it will fill it up without any worries. Yeah. Now I can see what I'm doing here, so you'll just have to have a look in a moment. Come on. It's a pretty blunt drill, that's what it is.
I've got it in reverse.
No, that's right.
I should have started it. That's good. It's nearly through. I'll get another drill. I'm just a bit concerned that whether this is too big a hole, but anyway.
Just right.
Just a bit blunt.
You've got to go in reverse again.
No, it's not. It should go through that. I think I only got 2 bits.
Pete, on top of the drill, if you just put it in the next speed, it might faster speed will.
Yeah, I don't
catch
really
up.
want it to go too fast because
Yeah.
the faster you go, it will
Boom.
the heat will get at the living tissue there. So I'm not unhappy that it's going slowly, but
Yeah.
yeah. It's breaking it out. This is not looking all that good. I'll go back to where I was before.
Still have high hopes for this tree, Peter?
I wasn't breathing.
Alright. It's a bit bigger hole than I'd have liked, but never mind, that's what happens. I just put a piece of wire around this a couple of days ago just to get it partly into the shape that I wanted to go, because sometimes if these get full of sap, you bend them and they snap pretty easily. So, this now can come.
Gonna knock it up.
Now where they come through, that's...
It's catchy.
Yeah,
There goes the bud.
I'll go back. Where they come through, because the buds come through opposite each other, I've got a choice. I can have the bud coming up that way, or I can turn it around and have the bud coming this way. If I was putting it in as a branch in a tree, I'd be pretty keen to get the buds coming out horizontally, so that when the branch comes out, the buds are in the right direction. The next set of growth will be the way I want them to go. I'm not too worried with this. All I want is something growing there so I can get a new top on it. So, something like that. And the chances are that this tree will throw other buds back around there anyway. So, whether I use this one or something else, I don't know. With another bit of a wedge.
Want another one?
No, I'm pretty good, thanks.
It's just the right size.
This one could probably do with two.
So will I throw it back at you?
Right. Now, if you're concerned about it, you can always get a bit of tape and put that round, keep the water out, which probably isn't a bad idea.
Keep the water out of the hole.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it won't encourage rotting in there. And of course the tape will help hold it in the right position anyway. And so the next, the top of this can come up to there, and if I wanted to I could put a bit of wire onto this now, but more important that it grows. And so I'm not going to want all this, so I don't have to carry all that home. I'll leave a couple.
Yeah, don't look at it.
No, they got the wrong way. So, another 12 months of growing, and 12 months, this will be a bit thicker than this, and then this will get cut off to where I want it to go and build it up. So, if you remember that stump that was over here, these are only smallish wounds, but if you wanted to grow it thick, then you let it grow further, you let it grow and get more depth, more trunk to girth. Now I mentioned before about wires growing into things. Challenge for you, Barry. Can you see there?
Just push the pot over a little bit for me. Yep, got it.
Yeah. So we've had 12 months of that growing on the rock. It's probably had 2 years growing on the rock there. I can still, on this side, I can see the wire. Can you see the wire on that side?
Yeah.
But look what it's done to the root, this way. Look how it's flattened it out. So it's already getting that sort of welded onto the rock spread, gripping on that's there. And if you look back at that surface where the wire's gone in, if you can have a close look across there, you'll see that there's not much wound showing there after 1 year. After 2 years, after 3 years, you won't see it at all. The wire's still stuck inside the middle of the tree. It's forced so tightly back onto the rock that it's going to be gripping that, really well. And you have attached it in a way that it's not coming off. Huh? Now, as most of you know, I grow smallish things. grow a bigger plant, I just tweak this strategy just a little bit. If I was happy with this amount of taper that's in that tree, I could go chop it off there and use this as, probably couldn't, I think the one's dead. But I could pick a bud from up the top and let that grow on, and then have a centimetre more on here, a centimetre more on here, a centimetre more on there. So it's not going to increase its taper very much from here to there. Basically, that tree is all but the same thickness here through to here. Now what? That's not for me. So this needs something drastic. So I'm going to make this the top. Hopefully I can put a piece of wire on that and pull it up a bit and then chop this off about here. Because what that'll then do is I'll have this thickness down the bottom, this thickness across the top of the root, so it's going to start reading as, I don't know, what's that, 50 millimetres, something like that. Yeah, something like that. Through to 20, through to nothing, and then in 12 months' time, thicker here, through to a centimetre, yeah? And then next time I pull it out of the pot, it's going to do the same. It's going to build that taper progressively out each year. And it won't build it out that there's come up to here and there's an abrupt finish. Yeah, go from whatever that is through to a cluster of branches puffing out from the top. It'll have buds bursting all the way back, so I don't need to do any thread grafting back into there. I can use that one, that one. I can pull out these top branches that are too heavy for what I want. But if you want a bigger tree, you might let those go. And a problem I find with that is, as the trees get thicker, the distance between the internodes gets bigger. And that's sort of the reverse of what you want your tree to get to be. You want the internodes closer at the top, so you can put more fine branching in at the top. But I've got buds here, I've got buds here, and that's sort of what I'd like down here, but up here I'd like them this close together. So I'm going to chop off all this stuff that's not doing what I want and put some movement in it in the direction that I want, and get rid of this stuff. Now if you really want the material, you can put an air layer on that, and you could, sort of start off with a tree that thickness with roots hanging off it at that point. It's a question of how many of these things you want. So let's put a bit of wire on there.
Just going back to that root that has absorbed that piece of wire.
Yep.
At some point next repotting, you're going to clip it off at each end and it's going to disappear.
And it'll grow over it. Yeah. And I could do that now. That's not going to force away from what's there. In fact, if I do that now, I'll use a little pair of concave cutters to take the wire, because the wire cutters don't get that close to it. And it's aluminium wire, it's soft stuff.
So there's no need to try and pull it out, though.
No. No, you do more damage pulling it out than you. So the roots that I left inside that first thing that I put on, I'm not worried about those at all. They will eventually be a piece of aluminium, inert. It's not going to damage anything inside the trunk. It's done its job by the time it's tightened it back onto the root. So, one of these, you're doing this back to front, and it's going the other way. So that's going to be the top, so that wants to and this comes up, heading this direction, that direction, so now it wants to come back this direction. There's a bit back there and that. Yeah, maybe there somewhere. Somewhere I've got a big pair of cutters. They must be looking at me. I'll put them in. Can't find the big cutters, so I'm not going to cut this off flush. If I cut it off flush, it's likely to get some dye back into the trunk from the cut being right next to the piece I want to keep. If I was doing this, the best time to do the cutting would be the middle of spring. Now, middle of spring, things are right in all their vigour and growing. The desire to live for the tree is just huge. And so, very little chance of this dying back if I cut reasonably flush. But I'm going to leave a bit of a stub there now. I'll leave that much, and I can go back and trim that up come the middle of the year, come October, November, somewhere around there. But it's, for now, bit of an angle's not a bad thing, it helps the water to run off it. Jamming it.
Timber.
Yes, just about there.
Get out the way.
Right, so the taper becomes fairly apparent. When we go from there, and then so I'll just put a bit of wound sealant on that and let it go for a while, and then by the end of this growing season, when this is a couple of metres high and this sits back on the ground for a while, the movement in this backwards and forwards, so the line of the trunk will be fairly well established.
What do you see as the finished height for this one?
That, something I can pick up in one hand. Right, I'll seal that up when I get home. Right. Now this is from the same batch, and you can see that I wasn't nearly as selective in wiring a bit of shape into the bottom of the tree. And there's no way I'm ever going to shift the shapes in that tree. If you look down here, it's not as bad as it might appear, because down in here, the rock is on this side and the tree sits in here, and there's plenty of roots, and this root on this side is fairly dominant, so it's starting to give a a look of direction, the way it's growing in this direction anyway. So I would really want the tree to come up, back, and probably up again from about here. Now, if I had a sharper drill, I'd go through there and put a seedling probably, because there aren't any buds down here that are long enough, but through there, this, and then make the new top coming out in the direction that I want from there. So I'm building in the taper from that to that to this in a couple of growing seasons. If I was wanting this to be a bigger tree, and I don't know why I went with that shape, but if I was, I'd be starting to worry about the internodal length between these. So I might go through and put a thread graft or two through here to get more branching up at this end. So it's the opposite end of the problem. It's putting finer growth up near the top. But that's a matter of taste, what size trees you want to grow, and working out a process that'll get you to where you want to be with trees of that size. Our library's got a really good book by a person whose name I keep forgetting. Meriglio, an Italian fellow who's got a terrific book on maples. It's a big book. It's up the back there probably. No one's got it borrowed.
But just the one also.
There it is, that one.
I'll put it back there.
It's a useful book. And he does some interesting things with all kinds of maples. One of the things, there's a chapter in his book where he's looking at how he can grow a thick trunk out of this sort of material. I had a go at it last year and it sort of works. I don't know what it's going to be like in the future, so I can't show you a finished example. But certainly it's getting lots of growth. And I'll show you a version of what he does. He's actually making a frame of wires and then growing plants around that frame. Now, to me, it just looked that making a frame would take me a lot longer than I was prepared to put in. So I got a whole lot of scrap wire to do this. You know how when you're pulling things out of pots, you've always got odd bits of wire to do something with. So you get a bundle of those wires, bits of aluminium, all sorts of lengths. It's not very hard to make a thick little tree. So, there are all sorts of lengths. That's a good one. A few shorter ones. How thick do we want our tree to be? Oh, maybe. Bit more taper, we'll use a short wire. Now I'm going to look at putting one onto a rock, which is sort of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to put a couple down here, a bit longer down. Maybe there. Maybe another one. I have no idea what I've done. I haven't left it sitting on the roof of the car. Help. So this aluminium trunk, you know, it goes from whatever it is at the bottom, centimetre or so, out to pretty well nothing up here. So I'll just do a bit of trimming. These are all poke myself in the eye. All right. So if we just squeeze those in with a good pair of pliers. Now, what design would we like in the trunk? You know, it's open for interpretation, taste. This should go up a bit at the top. Maybe. Vera? Yeah. A bit loose just there. I'd like to get that tight if I can. So we've got a wire armature. We wrap a few plants around it. We put it in the ground. 12 months later, they're still alive. Now they are slowly fusing together. You know, you wrap them tightly together, and when you put them side by side, they'll grow into each other, is what Eric Giol is doing in his book. And he's doing it on a hollow trunk that he's making, which, as I say, looks like a whole lot of work. But if you've got, like I do, a whole lot of scraps of wire, then make a solid wire trunk, but to work with the size of the tree you want to make. So I'm just going to pull some of these out of here.
Tree grafting interesting.
Yeah, you need a sharp drill, wouldn't you? There's aluminium, it's not really a, you know, it wouldn't be a problem to drill through, I don't think. Look, that's another one a bit longer. And they can go into the raffle as well, so I'll be saving it going home. So I've just got a little bunch of those. Some got longer roots than others. I'll put a couple down further so that I've got something to get back around here with. Yeah. That's another longer one. All right. Polypropylene. Nothing up my sleeve. Where are we? Is a good spot for you?
Yep.
So I've left a couple of longer bits that can go over the rock. I've got some there. Just spread these out a bit. So we can get around the trunk a bit like that. fussier than this, but I'm not going to be. And
What's that string?
it's just polypropylene string, yeah, it's a plastic coated sort of stuff. That if it bothers you using the plastic, you can probably use raffia or something like that, as long as it doesn't rot out before it does its job. All right. So that's going up that way, they're going that way. Where can I do this, Barry, that works for you?
Like that, mate. I'll follow you.
Yep, didn't like that. I did these in autumn last year and they didn't have breaking problems. But if you're worried about breaking them, you could sort of stop at that and go part way with them and, you know, give them a bit of a time to rest and have another go a bit later, but they're only whips. Didn't like it, that one. Now, it might upset the purist, but it's a way of getting some thickness from easily accessible material fairly quickly. Now I could have put a few more in there and covered a bit more of the wire, I guess, but anyway.
So in this instance, obviously you're embracing the possibility of difference in leaf
Yeah,
size, shape and
yeah,
colour.
yeah. Or if you wanted to get really, you know, finicky about it, just do a whole lot of cuttings and just, you know, use one batch of cuttings and just continue on with the one. Yeah, these are running into each. They're not spreading out enough. You see the idea. So we've got a bit of movement in a sort of a trunk. Right. Well, that's a while there. Bit like the first one, I did the same sort of process. Fix them. Another one there. tighter there, it'll just put it right back onto the rock. Now I've got no idea whether they're all going to survive, and you know, sort of, it's almost inevitable that the ones you want to survive will be the ones that don't, and the way it goes. But anyway, there, it's on there. So we can just see there's another one there. Whether it all survives or not, I don't know, but we can find out. I've got some soil here somewhere. Now, I don't know if you've got questions, I'm happy to try and answer questions.
Does that grafting come off eventually?
Yes, yeah. Eventually, the hope is that they will fuse together, and if some die, then I can always go over and put another bunch into the gaps. You know, the idea is that they will, over 2 or 3 years, that they will weld together to make a trunk that's many times thicker than, you know,
What they currently
the little whips, and see what happens.
Is that one a year old now?
Yeah, yeah. And so, look, I can see, you can have a look at it in your own time, but there's plenty of them that have survived, and if you look back in here, there are, you know, some are much the same thickness as when I put them on, and others have doubled in thickness. And I would imagine that when eventually they weld back, I'll probably chop it back to here, or so I'll grow another top out from, you know, from what's left there. But anyway, it's a thought you can have a go at. What's the time, Dave? It's 8:45. I don't know if people want to talk more about these things. I don't know. Or I'm happy to talk a little bit about grafting junipers.
I'm sure they would love to know. It's still early. Still got another at least maximum half an hour. Max.
Well, we won't need half an hour. So
There you go.
all right.
Peter, are you going to cut the ones on the tree in the front? The big rocks?
Oh, I'm sorry, David. I have got.
Thanks.
I spread it out in a way that I thought I could follow when I was in front of myself. Thank you.
I've got a question, might
Good.
sound silly, but where you threaded them
Yep.
and they're going around,
Yeah.
you're going to cut,
That's what I was going to do next.
right, I
And
think I
was
said that before.
duly reminded. I intended to leave this till last, and
I can see why my red over rock didn't work, because
Good.
it was in the sun, the roots were in the sun,
They-
not buried
yeah.
under in the pot.
so that, and that. I can all go into the raffle. This needs, whoever looks at that, it needs a water. And I won't do anything with this with that drill that's not doing what it should.
And another question, Peter.
Yep.
Your really two beautiful ones that are there, the
Yeah.
little ones, have you used thread grafting on those over the
Yep, that's fine. I don't think I have. I think that's just as they've grown out. Typically, I'd cut these back at least 3 times in a year, probably 4. And the best time to do them is the first flush that you get in spring. Let that harden off. So, you know, they're just starting to get leaves now. So in probably October, you know, 8 weeks' time, cut back, defoliate them, and the buds then will have the inner buds. You'll be able to see them a lot more clearly at that because they were puffed up a bit, and go back and cut back to where you get 2 buds that are both going in the direction you want. So if you wanted the branch to come up and down a bit, you might be looking for buds that go up and down. Yep. And if you want to come out horizontally, select a pair growing that way. And cut back to those, and you'll reactivate those buds and cut off whatever's out beyond it. Do that 3 or 4 times in a year, and you're getting 3 or 4 more lots of bifurcation. So you increase the twigginess of the tree fairly quickly if you keep at it. All right. This time last year, I was out in Yarra Valley having a talk to people out there about trident sunrise. And I put these thread grafts through out there. So it's the same process. This is, it's this tree a couple of years on. It's got a bit more development over the rock. It's got quite a bit of taper through to here, but it's just had no branches where I was. So these are whips from the top that have come back through, thread grafted through. This one at the back I'm a bit concerned about. I think I'll see what happens with it this spring. I think I've knocked off the buds that were back closest to the trunk, and so I'm still tossing up whether I'll put something else through there to get the buds in the right direction, or I'll say, look, it's at the back of the tree, well, I really want something to fill that in. Don't know.
Peter, does it matter if you get the threads from the top and go down, or is it preferable to go from the bottom and go up?
I don't think it makes much difference. I don't think it does. I mean, trees tend to be apically dominant, so you get more growth up here. But when you whip them round and pull them down, the chemicals that make them grow up are sort of doing this funny sort of loop, so I don't know. All right. Covers. How much can you see there, Barry? Can you see this one?
Let me get. Yep, clearly. Yep.
All right. This one comes down from here, so it's been a branch at the top of the tree, pulled down through a hole, and if you look here, it's now got like a collar around the branch, and right up against the trunk, it's double, nearly triple the width that it is back on this side. So clearly it's taken. That's not a problem. So that can be chopped off there. And so that means... I was looking at whether I'd put one of these back through here, but the buds on this are pretty big. Even with my drill, I'd be struggling with drill. So I'll take it. All right, so that's that one. This one is, I'll get it around this side so you can see. If you look at the thickness through here on exit point and the thickness through here where it goes in, it's clearly much thicker on this side than it is on this side. So it's taken as well, so we can take that. Now I can see here that there's a nice little shoot there. I'll keep that for now. This one I'm not sure about. This is the one that goes to the back, but I might leave that there for now. So this had no branches in at this level. The first branches, when I'd finished growing this on, came out at this level. And if I want to make a small tree, then it's pretty important to have low branches or it's just not going to work. If I was growing a tree at this height, I might not worry so much about that. So I've put one back here, this one, I think it's all right. So I've got a basic branch structure, sort of where I want it to be. Now there's still branches in here that are way too heavy that I'll at some stage cut back to branches that are sort of going in the right direction. But you can see you've got the front that way, this is the back, so that's come off here. I'm not going to take that off for now because I still might use it down the bottom. But I can thread back, graft back branches to wherever I want them to be, to whatever angle I want them to be, to whatever length I want them to be. So in growing the tree on, I'm in its early stages looking at getting this structure right, this thickness right, yeah, the taper right, and then sort of as a last resort, getting back to having branches in the positions that I want them to be. And I could have grown a full set of branches, I guess, in 12 months if I'd done more grafts. I'm not in any great hurry, and I'll eventually chop this back to maybe this one as a top. In here, cut this off.
How long will that last graft take, Pete, do you think?
This one,
Yep.
yeah. What I did with it, Barry, is when it was growing through, I was moving a pot and I broke the end off it. And so in the middle of summer, I pulled the wedge out from it and I put it through a bit further. Now I can see that there's still green in here. Whether these buds open up this year or not, I don't know. If this year the buds open up, then I'll have a look at what there is and maybe use that as a back branch, because all I want really is something there to fill in this direction. And if I don't get a branch, I'll by that time there'll be other whips up here that I can pull around and use and get the same material. But it doesn't happen in the time frame I want to get one of the little bits. And
Would you drill through the same hole?
I'd go through the same hole as long as I can see that the wood around it is still green. If it's dying back from that area, I'd pick another spot. Yeah. Right. Enough of that?
When do you pull the wedge out?
I don't. That one there, I just cut it back. Cut it back flush. And look, in 12 months it'll have grown over. It'll just be part of the mass of the fruit.
You're going to leave that little wedge in there, or?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. That can come off.
We talk about the black pot that we've got propping the tree up. Is that propping the
This.
rock?
This.
Yeah, like the top trunk under the roots. Is that just
Yeah, I put it in this piece.
Yeah.
I'll take it out.
Cost.
Yeah, I just want to, there are some finish roots on this side and on this side that I wanted to make sure they were well and truly down into the potting mix, because if I let the sun get at them, they'd likely to frizzle up over the summer. So I just put that collar around so I could fill that up with soil inside so that there's some protection for the things that are inside. And of course it adds a bit of soil mass so it keeps it more moist and it, Yep.
Put in the rifle there.
No,
No, the one in the blue box.
Right. It's 9 o'clock, David. What do you reckon?
Up to you. 15 minutes.
But people might want to watch the supper too.
No.
No one wants to see you.
Alright, maybe
We'll leave it at that.
yeah,
All right.
ask questions, any questions, ask questions.
Fertiliser. So you said you feed them up.
Yep.
Now, Obviously, that's going to help your whips, right?
Yep.
But does it also then extend the internodes?
Yep.
That's,
Yep.
we're not worried about that.
But these internodes won't change. It's only the new ones that come. So there's an internode there.
Yeah.
Now I don't want that. I'll cut this back to, if I cut it back to there, I've got internodes there. So they're already established. They won't extend. It's the new growth that will extend. Look, I'm fertilising them. It's not a one process fits all, because I'm trying to achieve different things at different times. So let's go through the different phases for a couple of minutes. I want bulk growth out of this. Yeah, the more it grows, the more they're well together. The better that's going to suit its needs. So I'll give that a coat of half a handful of osmocote. It's 15 parts nitrogen. It's high nitrogen. It makes them grow. And if it grows long internodes, so what? Because I'm going to chop those off. I'm interested in what I did last year in terms of getting the internodes short. So if I'm looking for bulk growth, they get bulk food and they get bulk water. But by the time I get through to these, they get a very different feed. Because I don't want great long internodes on those. I want those to be as fine as they can. These I could feed now. They're coming into bud now. There's some of those seedling things have already got leaves on them. They'll be taking up whatever nutrients are around from now. So they can be fed every handful of osmocote, I don't know, now, just before Christmas, again in early, February, March, something like that, another dose of it. Because if I can get 3 metres of growth on, that's diameter, that's size, that's something to chop back next year. But these, I give them very little and very often. So I would typically use 1 week, one of the seaweed. No nitrogen in that at all, but there are trace elements, things that will keep them growing. And they'll get that every 2nd week. I get it weak and often. Weak. Half strength. And I do the same with some of the fish fertilisers. There's plenty of those on the market. But not strong. I don't want to burn the roots, but I want there to be plenty of fine growth. So I'm not looking at heaps of nitrogen and blowing out great long internodes, big leaves. I want small leaves, short internodes. So enough to keep them going, fortnightly, week, half strength, and And as you go in between, depending on what you're trying to achieve, different amounts of fertiliser. So this is, once these get established, this will go back to refining. So it'll go back to more often and lower intensity of fertiliser to keep them growing. And so there's sort of I group them in the backyard. I group them so I've got the similar things that need similar treatment together, so I can deal with those, because it becomes a nightmare living there. We've got to put on that last week, So similar things together so that they get the same sort of treatment. I got these rocks from Coronella down on Western Port Bay. There's an area you can walk down along there and you pick up a bucket of them in no time. And if Stony Point's a bit closer to you, there's a reason they call it Stony Point. There's quite a few of them around there. There's a shelf of rock that sort of comes across Western Port, with the same sort of rocks in both places.
How about that beauty?
This one?
Yeah.
This is a bit of aquarium rock. It's not
Oh.
like that.
So how heavy is it?
This.
No, the rock you're picking up on the bay.
It's quite dense stuff. I've got a big trident on a rock that I bought in Japan, and when I bought it back, it had no soil and no pot. So it's just the plant and the rock, and it was 25 kilos. So, you know,
The rock would have to be fairly dense though, because if
Yeah.
it was too light, the tree would just crush it though, wouldn't it?
yeah, you need a good solid rock that won't deteriorate.
So sandstone wouldn't work, it would just
Not
crumble.
the best, no. And look, if you've got the choice, you know, rocks that are a colour that will sort of match the roots as well, so that it's even hard to tell, is that the root, is that the rock, is that, you know, just where they...
Peter,
Yes.
if I go to Japan for the holiday or something like that,
Yep.
we allow to buy the tree from Japan to bring to Australia.
Yes and no. You can, if you've gone through the proper processes. And look, I'll just talk very briefly about that, David. And you need to get a permit before you leave Australia. Not when you're there, before you leave Australia. So you've got to know what you're looking for. And there are some plants they will let you bring in, and there are some plants they will not let you bring in. So it's important to get a permit before you go. You have to bring them back with no soil at all.
No soil.
If there's any soil, they will destroy them.
And no leaf to
Doesn't matter about the leaves. No soil. And that's not as easy as it might sound. I've got a friend in Nagoya who runs a nursery, and so it's happy for me to go to his place and be able to wash it all off and pack it in wet sphagnum, and he puts them in like a big plastic, like a milk carton basically, without the division, and wires them in so that they will travel back. And then you've got to get them into quarantine. I had some plants I imported that sat in Sydney Airport for about 5 days, and they said they couldn't find them. And that might also be why, you know, some things don't do as well as others might. But they put them into quarantine for, depending on the kind of tree, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, if you can get the permit to bring them in. And they are quite expensive. When I started bringing them in, you could bring in 1 or 2 plants. Now they insist on you renting a table size. So it's a fair commitment they charge you for their care for a table size. So the notion of bringing in 1 or 2 plants is not, it's a bit more difficult than that. And once they get them, the first thing they do is they take all the sphagnum moss off them, and they treat them with a chemical methyl bromide, which to get rid of any bugs on them. And some trees handle it better than others. You know, so at one stage you could bring in junipers, but they had to stay in quarantine for 2 years. So if you're talking about a couple of $100 for them to look after them for 3 months, you know, 2 years starts to get...
big money.
And for a table load of them, you know, it's If you're interested in following up, have a look at the Australian Quarantine Service. They have lists of plants you can bring in.
And Peter, we don't want to see any members on border security on it.
No, you don't. No, it wouldn't be good, would it?
No.
I belong to the Bonsai Northwest. The bloke there said you can bring them in. Not exactly, I gave fair warning.
They said now if you bring the tree from overseas, come to Australia, and if you not declare, where the cost should be, they fine 12,000 or 12 months in jail.
And you can cut your bonsais off.
Put you in the quarantine.
You lock everything,
David, if you like, next meeting, is it a workshop night?
Yes, yes.
I might, if you like, I could bring couple of tulips.
Yeah,
and
perfect.
do
See
something
up
there.
here's a little demo like we
Yeah.
do. Barry, so
We
a
can
little
do
demo.
that. So
Yeah.
people want to do that.
I've just
Yeah.
got one more question.
Sure.
All right, quickly, Maria.
Quickly. When you thread it through,
Yep.
do so any of the buds have to stay inside the?
No, the buds are on this side that I want. If there's a bud inside, that doesn't bother
Doesn't
me.
matter.
I'm worried about the ones that have exited. And when you come and have a look, you'll see here there are two. See here, I'll cut that out, that centrepiece, and this will be the branch here. Yeah, so I get the two coming in the direction I want. Yep.
Speaking of buds, Peter, when you were putting for the roots,
Yeah.
you left some trunk of the seedling
Yep.
on the, will that kind of turn it, you'll just rub any buds that
Yeah,
rubbed off
the buds will
either
soon disappear when they've been
trunk,
buried for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you bury it right up to the top of the rock
Yep. For now,
for now.
because by keeping those roots damp, growing on the rock, they'll grow. They will become part of the rock. If have a look at this one, the root comes here and then comes up and then down, and then more roots come down this side. So the more those roots grow by keeping them damp, the more you'll get that adhesion onto the rock, and you'll get them doing what you want them to do.
So how long do you take to uncover them?
I'd leave them at least for 12 months, and if it's a tree with that collar on, then I might start by taking that away so I can see what's there, or when I open them up in this repotting time, if I'm potting them up, have a bit of a look at the roots and take off the roots that you don't want and decide which you're going to expose at that time. Yeah. Right.
Alrighty. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for.